Well, Whiskey Jason, welcome to New Riff finally. Took a while.
Yes.
But glad to have you here finally. So we're 10 years old, New Riff. We opened in 2014 and started selling our 4-year-old whiskey in 2018. And here we are. This is the distillery, obviously. Every drop of New Riff made here. We are not sourcers. We might be sorcerers of whiskey, but we are not sourcers. We don't buy other people's whiskey. We make whiskey, we make gin, all of it here. The barrel storage is off-site, as we were discussing. We don't have room at this location to store barrels. That's where we come from, so to speak, the party source. Titanic liquor store here in northern Kentucky. Right now we're standing actually in Bellevue. And if we were to walk on that sidewalk, we would be in Newport. So the city line is right there. New Riff Distilling is in Newport, Kentucky. And across the river, if you want to turn around, you can see the banks of the Ohio River. That's Ohio over there. That's Cincinnati, Ohio, my hometown. And that is our metropolitan area. So we're right across the river from Cincinnati. So New Riff, we'll go inside. I'll show you fermenters, show you the still tower and the stills and everything. But this is where I like to start my tours, right here. At this decidedly unglamorous manhole. This is the top of New Riff's well. This is where our water comes from. The first thing we did when the owner of the party source, I went to work for him in 2001. His name is Ken Lewis. He's an amazing man and my boss all these years. And he and I dreamed up the idea that he should sell the store and we'd put a distillery in the parking lot, and I'll be damned, it worked. Anyway.
You only need to sell it because of the 3-tier system, right?
That's right. He sold it to the employees. Very cool. Yeah, he did right by the employees. So anyway, when Ken said, let's do this distillery, the first thing I did was went looking for a better source of water, or a more exclusive source of water than the municipality. And that's what everybody else in Kentucky mostly runs on, is municipal water supplies. And I just wanted to try and find something better, and we found it right under our feet. To the south of here, that way, there are hills. And the hills are full of limestone. And that limestone in the hills, the water goes down into our aquifer. Right underneath us is an aquifer full of fantastic, hard, limestone-rich water. And we tap into that with a private well. This is 100 feet deep, the well, and this supplies water to the distillery. It supplies most of the cooling water that the distillery requires. And that saves us a lot of energy, a lot of fossil fuel burning, because we don't have to spend very much electricity to chill warm city water. We have geothermally cold 58 degrees Fahrenheit, that is degrees Celsius, 58 degree Fahrenheit water. 12 degrees Celsius. Okay, thank you, Whiskey Jason. So that is the beginning of New Riff. And the water, if you could taste our water, the water is rich and tasty and big and fat. Like, damn, this is some really flavorsome water. Where does this stuff come from? That's it. The most unglamorous thing on the whole Bourbon Trail is this manhole. I tell my tourists, yes, people, you came all this way to see a frigging manhole. But that is the soul of New Riff. That's where it all starts. All right? Well, let's head inside. Okay. All right, Whiskey Jason. Here we are in what we would call the fermentation hall, or the production room. These are the fermenters full of fermenting beer. When we opened New Riff, we had 4 fermenters. We had room to add 2 more. This is fermenter 6, there's fermenter 5. I thought we would add these, someday in success mode, year 7 or 8. We added these in month 10. That's how busy we were. So here is a fermenting beer. This will get distilled probably later today, overnight actually, and get turned into bourbon. This one is nearing the end of its fermentation. There's only a few bubbles now happening of carbon dioxide. We now have 9 fermenters. We managed to squeeze in 3 more fermenters at the far north of the building, and make about. Fermentation time, we typically let rye go 3 days, bourbon goes 3 or 4. Okay. These get filled, emptied, and distilled, and meanwhile we steam the fermenter. We can see one over there getting steamed now, and filled back up the same day. This enters the fermenter at about 70 degrees. This time of year about 68 degrees, and days later the job is done and it's all alcoholic. So to taste it now, this is sour, alcoholic, funky in that beautiful way. You get the esters. And note that this is very different from whiskey making, from beer making, whiskey, distiller's beer in, for example, Scotland. This is, get a shot of this, this is full of all the solids. Yes. See this? All of this, the whole thing, the liquid, the solids, everything goes through the still. Right. This is distillation on the grain. And in Scotland, they do it very differently. They would strain this off and have what they call a wash, and that's just pure liquid. But we distill on the grain, and so these solids are getting hit with steam as well as the liquid, of course, going through the still. So a very important distinction in how bourbon is made in the Kentucky, what we call the Kentucky regimen, how whiskey is made in Kentucky. And an important part of it is this distillation on the grain. So about our grains, by the way, we have silos out the back of the, outside the distillery, full of corn and rye and malted barley, and that's what becomes most of our whiskey. We also have the capacity to run any bag of grain. It could be a 50-pound bag, or it could be a 2,000-pound bag. Here we have 2,000, they're actually 2,200 pounds, 1,000 kilos of our malted rye. And please observe where that comes from. This is from Weyermann in Bamberg. Did I say it right? Yep. And this is our rye. So when we make our 100% malted rye whiskey, which we'll taste in a few minutes, we bring the grain in from Germany, actually. We direct import these what they're called super sacks. We bring these in a container, direct imported to the distillery from Weyermann, the wonderful maltster in Bamberg. When we went to make malted rye for the first time, our now master distiller, Brian Sprance, came to us from the brewing industry. And he knew exactly where to go to get a supply of malted rye, because in America there's not very much malted rye used. In Germany, of course, they have the tradition of Roggen, the rye beer. And so this is where our malted rye comes from. So I want to show you this. This is a fermenter that we just filled today. This is a fermenter full of rye. And if we look at it, it's darker, as you can see. And look at how much more headspace we have to have. This is because rye tends to foam up, and will foam over if we don't give it that extra headspace. So here's a fermenter of rye. If we touch this stuff, once again, you can feel it's kind of slimy, it's kind of oily a little bit. This is one reason why rye is so hard to make, is this tendency to foam and gum things up, especially in the still. This also is a 95% rye mash bill, ridiculously high rye content, and we're very good at making this kind of rye whiskey. One of the hardest whiskeys to make in the world, mash bills to make in the world. Well, WhiskyJason, you have come to the Tower of Power. This is the still tower. This is full of our stills in here. I'm going to take you down to the first floor and show you up close the pot still and the doubler. But here is the main whiskey making machine. This is our column beer still. This is different than a column still like they would use in Scotland or Ireland. This, as I was saying earlier, this digests the beer out there that you saw, the whole thing. All the solids, everything goes through this. So today we're distilling bourbon. Behind each one of these portholes, these glasses, is a plate. We can't see the plate right now because it's full of beer. But behind this is a plate, and the plate has holes in it, 285 little holes. So the beer comes into the still, it sits on the plate, and it binds the plate, and it goes down to the next plate. So from each of these, the beer is stepping down sequentially like this. Meanwhile, in the bottom of the still, we inject low pressure steam, and that trickles up through the holes in the plate, hits the alcohol in the beer. It becomes an alcoholic vapor going out the top of the still and becomes condensed in our copper condenser back into the spirit, which is right here. So the spirit condenses back into a liquid, and it comes out here in this box. This is called the low wines. It's 120 proof, and as you can see, it's all right. It's tasty. It's also a little bit sulfurous, a little sweaty, a little bit disjointed, you know. The second distillation takes care of this character and becomes what we call the high wines. This spirit is conducted to the doubler, where it is distilled a second time. Vapor comes up this line arm, there's the doubler, and henceforth into this copper condenser, where it becomes the high wines, and that comes out here. And this is 135 proof. And as you'll taste, mother's milk. I tell you, oh, it's so good. The cabbage, the funk is diminished now. It's cleaned up, it's ripe, delicious. Pretty tasty, right? 200 years ago, if you were on a farm in Kentucky and you made this, you would be real happy. So that's the distillation process in a nutshell. I mentioned copper. Not only is the still copper, the entire distillation path is copper. Anywhere that the beer is hot, we want it interacting with copper ions, with copper. So the beer still is copper. The beer heater, that's that torpedo-shaped object way up on the side. The beer heater is copper, copper condensers, copper line arm, copper doubler, even the reflux line right here. This is copper, right? Anytime that it's touching, that it's hot, whether it's in a vapor state or the beer, we want it interacting with that copper, because it's the copper that knocks down some of that funky flavor, but also copper that imbues the spirit with what it needs to age. So we took no chances on what was adequate copper contact. We want 100% copper contact. And so the entire distillation path is copper. When you go to many distilleries in Kentucky, if you can see the still, you will see that they have a stainless steel beer still. And we do not, it's copper. Someday we'll have to replace this. But in the meantime, it's giving us the best possible flavor and the best possible aging that we can get.
All right, very good. So you had a little bit of consultants at the beginning, I think, didn't you, that also helped you plan and make sure you had enough copper?
Yes, along with the well, there's the manhole again.
Yeah.
Along with the well right there, the most serendipitous part of starting New Riff was finding a master distiller consultant to help guide us, help design all of this, teach us how to run it. And that was Larry Ebersol, the best master distiller in the business. And he lives right here in Northern Kentucky. And he was available for consulting work. And so he helped us map all this out and trained us to run it. So here we are, WhiskyJason, in what we call the barreling room. These are gauge tanks to which the spirit comes after it comes off the still. These hold 750 gallons, or the output of one fermenter. These are relatively small. These are not so large that we mix, say, 4 or 5 fermenters together and then barrel it. We can really only barrel one batch at a time. That means that when we do a single barrel, it reflects not only the certain flavor of this pile of wood versus this pile of wood versus that pile of wood, but also captures a lot of the flavor of the fermentation. And that gives our single barrel products a really wide range of possible flavors or possible style or character. We cut to 110 proof, relatively low. The maximum, of course, for bourbon is 125. We go in a lot lower in order to capture some different flavors at 110 proof, 55% ABV, more water-soluble flavors. But an even bigger reason why we choose to do it is we learned in our research the whiskey would show better younger at the lower barreling proof. And we needed a 4-year-old whiskey to be banging, to be as good as it could possibly be. So we're happy to go in at the lower proof, even if it does cost us about 25% more annually in terms of the cooperage we need. 110 proof. The barrels are mostly char number 4. They mostly come to us from Independent Stave, right here. Char number 4. They are toasted. The head is toasted. And we also do use a portion of barrels that are 18-month air-dried wood, and those get a heavy toast and a char number 4. And we also have some barrels that are 24-month air-dried staves. These are the BMW. How do you even say it in German?
Yeah, BMW, sorry.
There you go. The BMWs of the barrel world. 24-month air-dried staves that get a heavy toast and a number 1 char. So there are a couple of different sort of wood flavors or wood characters that go into New Riff's whole recipe. We also get a small amount of barrels from Kelvin Cooperage in Louisville. They round out the barrel formula. And then a whole bunch of other kinds of barrels for our single malt, about which more in a moment. All right.
Production capacity at the moment?
We make about 12,000, up to 12,000 barrels a year. With that new expansion, the other 3 fermenters that came online in January of 22, I believe it was, that takes us up to 12,000 barrels a year. These are 53-gallon, 200-liter barrels only. We do not use small barrels. Oh, no small barrels here at New Riff, only the proper large full-size barrels.
And the ratio of bourbon, rye, and malt at the moment?
Well, we don't make a lot of malt, maybe 100 barrels or less a year of malt whiskey. We make mostly bourbon, but between our 30% 30% rye mash bill in the bourbon and the 95% rye mash bill in the rye whiskey, when you add it all up, we typically mash maybe 20% more rye grain than corn in a given year. Nobody does that in Bardstown or in Louisville. We make a lot of rye here at New Riff, but a majority of bourbon. All right, Jason, I wanted to tell you about the grain source. So here are silos. This is corn, rye, malted barley. Yes, 2 rye silos, 1 corn silo. Again, they don't do it this way in Bardstown. So the corn comes to us from a single family farmer in Indiana. He's about an hour and a half up the road in Indiana. We think he's the best corn farmer in the bourbon business. His name's Charles. He's got a great name for a farmer. His name is Charles Fogg. Fogg with 2 G's.
Yeah, good.
He's a meteorological event. Anyway, Charles Fogg is our corn farmer. He also supplied us with the initial batches that became our Balboa rye, our famed and award-winning heirloom rye whiskey. The rye in these silos actually comes to us from Northern Europe. We use what we think is the best supply of rye in the business as well. This is cleaned. We pay extra to have the corn cleaned and the rye cleaned. Almost nobody pays for that, but when you're making a 95% rye recipe, one of the critical angles to get that right is to have the rye be very clean, very pure, very low foreign matter, foreign material, things like that. So very clean, beautiful rye. And the rye comes to us from Northern Europe. Typically Sweden, but sometimes the source does actually come from Germany. Also, it has been Poland, maybe Denmark, but if it's not from Sweden, it's probably German rye, actually. WhiskyJason, welcome to a part of the distillery we don't normally take people. This is the bottom of the still tower. We don't normally take people here because of occupancy problems. We can only have 4 people down here, so we don't bring tour groups down here. We are just 2 people, so we're all good. So I wanted to show you the doubler up close. That is an essential part of the Kentucky style of whiskey making. To run it to the doubler continuously and not diverting it to a pot still. That is copper doubler. We do have a pot still, however. This is our 500-gallon pot still, also made by Vendome. Vendome is the great and legendary company in Louisville, Kentucky, that makes the stills for the bourbon industry. And this is a 500-gallon hybrid pot still. It has a little column on the top. This has made whiskey, but primarily this makes our gin. Whiskey Jason, welcome to the Aquafer. This is New Riff's bar, if you will, New Riff's whiskey library. We opened this in November last year, and it's called the Aquafer, so named after our wonderful water supply. This used to be an event space. We had weddings and corporate celebrations and all sorts of things. But we realized after losing all that in the pandemic, we realized we don't really want weddings anymore. They come with brides. They were a nice moneymaker, but no one was coming out of a wedding learning about New Riff. They just had a great wedding. And we realized, we need people to experience New Riff. And so we have a whiskey library. When you're a 10-year-old distillery, you can have a whiskey library. So our contractors are doing a little maintenance work today, given that we're closed today. But this is open 6 days a week. You can pop in here after a tour. You can taste all the whiskey we ever made. You see them all here, with fantastic cocktails and mixology. We have a wonderful bar program here. It's really a very elevated situation over what it used to be. All right, Whiskey Jason, welcome to one of our little tasting rooms here at the distillery. I'm going to show you a few libations. Wanted to point out we do now have some older whiskey. We have been holding back 20 to 30% of everything we make annually in order to become older whiskey. We didn't know what the age would be. We just let the whiskey talk to us, and when it was ready, it would come out. And now we are possessed of 8-year-old bourbon and rye. Super cool. We're very proud of this. It's definitely a moment in the distillery when you get the older whiskey and you can elevate to the next age level. So this is not available from our UK supplier yet. It only came out in the spring with 8-year-old bourbon, and then in June of this year with 8-year-old rye. But in the fullness of time, we will see some overseas as well. So look forward to that. I wanted to show you also this 100% malted rye. 6-year-old. The mash bill is on the back of the bottle. We always try and put the mash bill on the back of the bottle, right there, 100% malted rye. And that's made with the grain we saw earlier from Bamberg, the malted rye. It's a 6-year-old. And what happens to malted rye, happens to the rye grain when you malt it, I wondered what would happen. And I thought, maybe, what if it gets spicier, even more intensely spiced? And I thought, man, that's great, bring it on. But that's not what happened. This gets soft. You see what I mean? Elegant, graceful, sophisticated, mellow, sweeter. It begins to talk. It begins to act like a malt whiskey first and a rye whiskey second. It still has rye spice, but it approaches the palate so differently than the other rye that we make, which is much more intense, more focused in the spice. This one is just so elegant, just lovely, lovely stuff. Malted rye is another one that I don't think has made it to continental Europe yet, but it will. And I believe our English connection will probably have a little bit of this later this year. When it gets to Germany, I don't know, but it will happen someday. So that's 100% malted rye. And finally, look, this bottle's almost gone. You think we can kill it? This is New Riff's Sour Mash Single Malt. This is a whale of a project. We started this in December of 2014. We had not even been distilling 6 months in our careers here at New Riff before we embarked on making malt whiskey. So this is not just a malt whiskey. There are 5 different mash bills that go into this. All of that is crossed into 6 different types of casks for this release, and 2 vintages. It has a 7-year-old age statement right there, but in fact, about 60% of the bottle is 8-year-old. And so this has 5 mash bills that we weave together to make sour mash single malt. I'll tell you what the mash bills are, and by the way, there's a blog post on our website that tells the whole story. But comprising this are mash bills that are, the first one is 100% Maris Otter malted barley. The second one is 100% Golden Promise malted barley. So those 2 are a pure barley expression. One of them is a British brewing malt, Maris Otter. The other one, Golden Promise, is a classic Scotch whiskey malt. Then for whiskeys number 3 and 4, our now master distiller, Brian Sprance, and along with me, we were sort of partners in this project. I brought my point of view to this project, and Brian brought his point of view to this project. And he approached this from his brewing background, and he wanted to try and just explore what happens with different barley malts when you turn them into whiskey. And he made 2 beer-related recipes. One mash bill, number 3, is a barley wine style mash bill, and the number 4 is a Belgian quad, a Belgian quadruple. Finally, whiskey number 5, 100% peated Scottish barley. So there is a peaty element in this. All of that goes into 6 different barrel types. It is new charred oak barrels, decharred, toasted, used barrels, recharred, toasted, used barrels, red wine casks, Portuguese brandy casks, Oloroso sherry. So this tremendously complex project, New Riff Sour Mash Single Malt. And the back of our bottles always proclaim a new riff on an old tradition. You can see it on the back there. And this one is in particularly a powerful riff, if you will, right? A rock and roll riff. It's us riffing or examining or really interpreting the traditions of barley malt whiskey making from other countries, namely an exploration of Scotland, but also an exploration of barley malt as it's expressed in beer styles. So it's an absolutely one-of-a-kind single malt, nothing else like it really on the market at all. It's a crazy project. Why don't we try it?
Yep. All right, cheers.
Cheers, my friend. All right, WhiskyJason, welcome to the warehouse. This is our West Campus. It's in West Newport, so we call it the West Campus. This is several buildings that comprise our warehousing situation, also bottling line, finished goods storage, offices for some of the sales team, private barrel selections happen here, all of that kind of stuff. So this campus dates back to the late 1890s. It was a former streetcar company, and these buildings, this brick building we're in, dates from the late 1890s and the early 20th century. And we have been here since 2014. We used to use this for barrel storage and eventually built a rick house that is the barrel storage today. But this is now offices and bottling line and stuff like that. So if we want to go for a walk, we can come this way. So these barrels are the single barrel private barrel selection program, bourbon. There's also rye available. And right here we see over here a team picking out a private barrel with our fantastic ambassador, Creola Dickerson, guiding them around. So if you do a private barrel pick, you would come here and taste from these barrels and make your selection. So this wing, this portion of it was built in 1946, and they had, this was like a bus repair facility, so you see all these garage doors. Here's the bottling line, now shut down for the day. We finished up work earlier. Bottling line, here are finished bottles, and these are bottling tanks. This is where we would dump barrels together for bottling. Barrels get dumped into this trough. And the only filtration they go through is right here. This screen filter, we put a bag in here, a 5-micron bag. That's it. No chill filtration. We could not chill filter if our lives depended on it. We just do not even have the equipment. This is the only filter that we see. And we dump the barrels here, and they go to these bottling tanks and thenceforth to the bottling line. Our single barrels get processed one at a time through these stainless steel drums. So very low tech, very flexible arrangement we have here for bottling new Riff. All right, Jason, here is our rick house. We built this, commissioned this December of 2017, I think. It is a different style of construction than most of the rick houses you see in Kentucky. Most of what you see in Kentucky are what are called rick-supported structures, where the rick that holds the barrels inside, the rick is the structure, it is the building. And the walls you see are just cladding, just sheet metal as often as not. So this is different. Because we're in an urban location, we were required to have containment. And so this is a concrete shell. These are raised concrete slabs. We brought in these slabs and raised them up like this. We built a concrete box, and then we built the rick inside that. So let's go inside.
Oh, yeah.
So 5 stories tall. This holds about 18,000 barrels or so. 5 stories, 3 barrels per tier. It is unconditioned, unheated. Very natural aging environment. Oh, look here. Look at this baby.
Sherry butt.
A sherry butt. Yeah, this is full of peated malt whiskey, as a matter of fact. So uniquely, again, to the construction, this concrete box, it also has uniquely right here a foam fire suppression system, foam. We were required to have that again because of the urban location, and the only warehouse probably in Kentucky that has one. That's for the safety of the community if anything should ever go hideously, knocking on the wood, hideously wrong. But maybe also will save the barrels. At any rate, yeah, a unique, one-of-a-kind warehouse. It probably tends a little bit on the cool side as warehouses go. It is painted black to soak up some heat, and it gets hot upstairs. It's probably 100 degrees on the top floor today, but it is a little bit maybe cooler than some of the classic warehouses of old Kentucky. Yeah.
So how many stories do we have here? 6?
5 stories top. Yep. Yep. Yeah, this is a great view up to the top. Yep. We also have a palletized warehouse on this site, as well as a third campus, also here in Campbell County, Kentucky. It's about 15, maybe 18 minutes from here in a community called Silver Grove, and that is a third campus, right, with another palletized warehouse, much larger than the other ones, about 30,000 barrels that can hold be stored there.
You have the brand Silver.
Right, we have a little side label called Silver Grove that is in partnership with the Silver Grove Community Foundation as a benefit to our local partners in Silver Grove. This is our private barrel selection room. This is where our clients come from around the country, around the world, and pick out their private barrels. So you would be received here, get a little tour of the warehouse, and do your selection here, and then typically make your way to the distillery where we receive you in style as well over there. So we try and do it right. You know, we had so much fun when we were retailers, picking out private barrels, doing special projects with the bourbon distilleries. So much fun with that we wanted to bring it to our consumers and our customers and give them a taste of it too. So, Jason, great to meet you finally. Thanks for coming. Boom. And y'all come back now, as we say in Kentucky. And how about we have one last dram? some 8-year-old.
Very good.